War criminal Benjamin Netanyahu has never been this cornered, with more and more nations in both Western and Eastern Europe stepping forward to recognize the state of Palestine. His usual game of shifting blame and milking global sympathy has collapsed. The October 7th Palestinian counter-offensive, which he hoped to weaponize as an excuse for endless occupation, has instead exposed his failures and left him stumbling. He is not just confused, he is teetering, making reckless decisions that could accelerate the downfall of Zionist colonialism itself. Protests are now shaking Italy in defiance of him, while at home in Tel Aviv, anger is boiling over. Crowds in Jerusalem openly brand him wanted for negligence and for abandoning political prisoners in Gaza, proof that even within his own camp, the mask is slipping.
Tonight, a growing number of countries have formally recognized a Palestinian state.
Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper says she's warned Israel not to annex parts of the West Bank in retaliation for the UK's formal recognition of Palestinian statehood.
Emmanuel Macron's speech that really showed why this is not a full-fledged victory. He said some will say it's too late, some will say it's too early. So some, like Germany, Italy, say it's
While there are already questions as to what tangible difference this will make on the ground, the Palestinian Authority's foreign minister insists it's far more than symbolic.
Believing that there can be peace and security in the region without the materialization of an independent state of Palestine and the achievement of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people is a delusion.
The tide of recognition gathered speed in 2024 when Ireland, Norway and Spain broke ranks on May 28th, followed days later by Slovenia on June 5th. The momentum only grew stronger. By September 2025, Portugal and the United Kingdom joined in, backed by non-European nations like Canada and Australia. Then came the watershed moment of September when Andorra, Belgium, France, Luxembourg, Malta and Monaco formally recognized Palestine, tipping Europe firmly into the pro-Palestine column. Today, roughly 156 nations worldwide, including a decisive European majority, have acknowledged Palestinian statehood, a fact that Israel and its shrinking circle of allies like the United States and Germany can no longer suppress.
We must recognize that Palestinians and Israelis are living in twin solitude. The solitude of the Israelis following of the 7th of October 2023 and the solitude of Palestinians. Palestinians at their wits' end in the face of this ceaseless war. The time has come because the worst could still come to pass. The sacrifice of more civilians, the expulsion of the people of Gaza to Egypt, the annexation of the West Bank, the death of hostages detained by Hamas, or facts on the ground which could irreversibly change the situation there on the ground. This is why, this is the very reason that today, here in this chamber, we must pave the way for peace, because since July of last year, developments have accelerated, and at this point, we have reason to fear that the Abraham Accords, the Camp David Accords, could be called into question by Israel, and that peace would become impossible for a long time yet in the Middle East. It thus falls to us, this historic responsibility. We must do everything within our power to preserve the very possibility of a two-state solution. Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. The time has come. This is why, true to the historic commitment of my country to the Middle East, to peace between.
Faced with this diplomatic avalanche, Netanyahu's reaction has been nothing short of satanic rage. Dragging his extremist partners into the spotlight, his criminal ally Bezalel Smotrich brazenly declared that Israel had paid a lot of money for the war and must now divide the land in Gaza like spoils. Take a moment to like this video to help us bypass the suppressive YouTube algorithm.
האם אנחנו מפחדים מניצחון? הם לא שמעו מכאן עד עזה. האם אנחנו מפחדים מניצחון? האם אנחנו מפחדים מהמילה כיבוש? אנחנו כובשים את ארץ ישראל. אנחנו משחררים מיישבים את עזה. אנחנו מנצחים את האויב. אנחנו אומרים תודה לקדוש ברוך הוא. אנחנו מבקשים ממנו עוד. לא מספיק. אנחנו מבקשים ממנו עוד יותר טוב בעזרת השם, מתוך אחדות ירושלים, מתוך קדושת ירושלים, מתוך שמחת ירושלים, נזכה בעזרת השם.
Instead of adapting to reality, Netanyahu reacts like a cornered tyrant. He lashes out, recalling ambassadors, condemning recognitions as terror rewards, and then unleashing more violence on the ground. In the West Bank, this means brutal raids, mass arrests, and expanded settlement theft policies designed not for security, but for humiliation and permanent occupation. Settler militias, emboldened by his extremist ministers, are given free rein to attack Palestinian communities while soldiers stand by.
Unlike the claim of the Prime Minister of Israel, this attack is not a legitimate right to follow perpetrators of terrorism. It is an act of a diplomacy that is dedicated to political assassinations, and it undermines any diplomatic efforts aimed at ending the genocide against the people in Gaza. It is also an attempt to kill politicians who are members of a delegation that engages in negotiations with Israel while they were studying an American proposal. As you know, Qatar hosts, as a mediator during the negotiations, hosts delegations of Hamas and Israel. Qatari mediation has, in fact, achieved, in cooperation with Egypt and the USA, the release of hostages. And the last agreement was negated by Israel unilaterally, preventing an ability to reach a permanent ceasefire and the release of all hostages and the withdrawal of the occupying forces from the Gaza Strip and the humanitarian access and the release of Palestinian prisoners. They visit our country and plot to attack it. They negotiate with delegations and plot to assassinate the members of the negotiation teams. It is difficult to cooperate with such a mentality that does not respect the most minimum standards of cooperation. It is impossible. Is this not the definition of a rote government? The delegation, they consider negotiations a continuation of war in other means and a way to delude the Israeli public opinion. If the release of Israeli hostages is the end of war, the government of Israel is abandoning the notion of releasing the hostages. Their goal is to destroy Gaza so that it is unlivable and where no one can study or receive treatment. In other words, end the viability of the Gaza Strip.
Netanyahu hides behind the language of defense, while presiding over a regime of apartheid thuggery that would collapse tomorrow without foreign backing. His instinct is not to govern responsibly, but to double down on cruelty because he knows no other way to cling to power. South Africa predicted the future of a violent Israel vividly at the General Assembly.
I would like to welcome the demonstrable groundswell of support for the establishment of the much-awaited state of Palestine by 142 nations.
Now, recognition also sharpens the demand for Palestinian democracy, something Netanyahu fears more than rockets. A national election across Gaza and the West Bank would produce a single government with international legitimacy, a nightmare for Israel's propaganda machine. That is why Netanyahu has always sabotaged Palestinian ballots, blocking movement, suppressing East Jerusalem votes, or declaring outcomes illegitimate. He cannot stomach Palestinians voting freely because he knows the result would shred his claim that there is no partner for peace. The truth is simple. The only real obstacle to democracy in this region sits in Netanyahu's office, choking it at every turn. Gaza's defenders, long smeared as terrorists by Netanyahu's spin, now stand on firmer ground. Recognition reframes them as part of a sovereign nation's struggle for survival against foreign domination. The logical next step is to fold them into a unified Palestinian security structure, whether as an army or a national guard. Netanyahu dreads this possibility because once resistance is embedded in a recognized state, his propaganda collapses. He needs Palestinians to remain stateless so he can keep branding their defense as illegitimate. Recognition rips that mask away and shows the world what Palestinians have always been, a people fighting occupation. International law is now swinging like a hammer. The International Court of Justice declared Israel's presence and settlements unlawful, and Netanyahu cannot spin that ruling away. States are legally bound not to aid his regime of theft and apartheid. Already Europe has sanctioned violent settlers and is moving toward trade suspensions and penalties that strike at Israel's economy. Netanyahu's bravado collapses when money and legitimacy are on the line. Every recognition, every sanction is a reminder that his policies are not only immoral but criminal in the eyes of the world. The good news is that recognition gives Palestinians leverage they never had before: embassies, treaties, legal tools, and international backing. The bad news is that Netanyahu will only grow more reckless, unleashing settlers and soldiers in a desperate bid to crush Palestinian unity. The ugly possibility is that internal divisions among Palestinians could be exploited if elections and reconciliation falter, but even here, the root saboteur is Netanyahu, who thrives on keeping his enemies divided. Thank you for watching. Support my simple work for the cause of Palestine by subscribing to increase our reach. Until I see you in the next one, God bless you